are approaching the finish line fast, dear Schnookies, and we are looking at the candidate and message arrangement in political messages. I would like to just appeal to your general knowledge here. A lot of what is being said during these last sections of your Unit 4 you already know. But, of course, it's always nice to hear it again from somebody else, so here we go. Now, of course, choosing a political candidate is a tricky matter. The kind of background checks that actually go into determining who should be the poster girl or the poster boy of your political party are really, really intense and really insane. So the candidate has to obviously be very presentable. They have to have a certain verbal and non-verbal appeal. They have to be proficient in the language that they are using. And a bit of dynamism, of course, also goes a long way. In the last 20 years, I am glad to see that this very wooden, very professionally looking idea of a political candidate is starting to crack open a little bit. We do see our political leaders in more informal contexts as well. We do get an inkling of them being plain folks or people that we can actually relate to. However, there are certain things that would make you more ideal as a candidate, or as they say here, there are certain favorable aspects. In terms of age, you need to actually consider that it cannot be somebody too young. However, in order to get young voters to cast their vote, maybe a younger person would be a good idea. You want them to have a bit of experience running a country or making decisions about a country. You don't want to have a greenhorn. You don't want to have somebody who has no idea how to do that. The educational background is very important. I think much more important than a family background. People today are more understanding if the person comes from a broken family or if they don't have the best upbringing. Maybe that might even be favorable for them. The kind of occupation that they have showcases their ability to hold a job down. It proves that they can do a job, and it puts you in good stead for your term. Meeting people and having a lovely temperament goes a long way in political communication. So make sure that your political candidate has that empathetic air about them, is easy to talk to, has a way with people. Above all else, leadership qualities would be great. However, how do you actually define leadership qualities? We started off Unit 4 by looking at the different traits of an ideal leader, and you could see leadership is a multifaceted discipline. I think it's very hard to box somebody into trait 1, trait 2, trait 3 to pronounce them a good leader. Ultimately, it's in the minds of the voters, the minds of the citizens, whether they have leadership quality. Administrative ability, this is more a backstage kind of factor that you should keep in mind. Yes, the person needs to be on top of things. The person has to be organized. Their reputation can also definitely make a dent in the acceptance of them. Just a look at Donald Trump. He was a well-known media figure, a well-known professional figure. Definitely that helped him with his election. Whomever you choose, there are people who will vote for you. There are people who won't vote for you. People usually do not change their minds based on the candidate that you're putting forward. However, a good candidate can make a difference if your voters are actually undecided. They give you a few further hints of how to actually get these undecided voters, of how to tickle their fancy. And familiarity is definitely right on top of the list. Coming back to Trump, people were familiar with him. So if you're staring at a ballot of names that you don't know and you see a familiar name, what do? You put your tick there. If you want to get to the undecided voters, you need to have acceptable policies. Once again, I completely disagree. I think you need to rattle. I think you need to be controversial nowadays, and this is exactly what Trump is. The candidate's image must be acceptable. Yeah, that would be nice. How come I always come back to Trump on this? He didn't have an acceptable image. He's a bigot. He hates women. He treats immigrants like shit. So, I don't know how that works with what we know right now, but maybe we should give Devet, the author of your book, the benefit of the doubt. He actually wrote this book before Trump came into power. What is very important is that your candidate needs to distinguish themselves from their opponents. You cannot have more of the same. You need to showcase how your candidate distinguishes themselves. What is also very good is if the candidate comes into contact with these undecided voters. And it's even better if the candidate can be introduced or can be endorsed by somebody that is already known, that is already loved, that is already in good repute with the citizens. Now that we have checked out what makes an ideal candidate, let's look at the style and arrangement of formal political messages, or better to say, speeches. Some of the things we have already brought up when we talked about the different types of audience, but let's look at the linguistic side a little bit more. Firstly, they say here, use current idiom. Use the language of the people, the language that is currently in circulation with the people. Don't use archaic terms. Don't use old, cliched kind of terms. Keep it hip. Did I just say that? Keep it hip and make sure that you are not over-jargonizing and overusing technical terms. Describe your ideas. If you can get a little bit of a narration going, if you can get illustrations going, examples going, good for you. Do that. Metaphors are great, but they have to really relate to what you have to say. If you're choosing your metaphor, make sure that they can provide quick learning and that people don't have to go, I wonder what they meant by that. Not a good choice then. I always say to you, reasoning is so important. Conjunctions, transitions can help you showcase your reasoning. Take the audience member by the hand and don't let that hand go by jumping to conclusions or by being illogical. Make sure that you're following a certain structure. We have chatted about glittering generalities and the fact that political language very often is super vague and there's not much behind it. They say here, if you can avoid it, please try to do so. Yes, sometimes it's intended. If you don't want to give somebody a straightforward answer, then yes, you want to be vague. Yes, you want to use ambiguous language. But people are bored. People are bored of ambiguous language. They are bored of guessing. They are bored of these empty phrases that politicians love to use. And I actually posit that Trump got so much support because he calls a spade a spade. I don't like his spade. However, the language that he uses is straightforward and very descriptive. You can also do quite a bit through rhythm and liveliness. I have previously referred to the oomph, the dynamism in your speeches and in your messages. Don't be too metrical though. Don't be sermon-like, because once again, that puts people to sleep. For example, a Martin Luther King Jr. was great for his time, but nowadays where there are rallies everywhere and people talk everywhere and people give speeches, the audiences very quickly get bored and fall asleep. So rather mix it up, rather emphasize certain parts, surprise, sometimes shout, or sometimes become very silent. Mix it up so that people hang on every word that you're uttering. What is also part of style and arrangement is the appropriateness of your message. Always look at your audience first. How would they like you to deal with the subject matter? What kind of examples would they like you to bring up? Please ask yourself, what is in good taste, what is not in good taste? I know that I sometimes get quite informal in my lectures, but I do believe that this is the way that you actually will understand it. For me, being appropriate also means to stir the pot, to provoke you once in a while, because I know getting a reaction out of you means that you re-look at these topics that I'm proposing. And that's exactly what politicians want as well. They want you to take another look. Now, in terms of the arrangement of your political speeches or your political messages, you know that you should have a structure. We've already talked about it. It can be inductive, it can be deductive, as long as you know how you want to develop your ideas. Also, make sure that all of your messages have an introduction, that you make a statement, that you argue that statement, and that you have a conclusion, which is called an epilogue in political speeches. Guys, you can have a look at some of the tactics and insights that they propose here for your proem/introduction. For example, that you can start off by making your objectives clear. You can start off by a little bit of humor. You can start off by something surprising. Don't forget to make a statement in the middle of your speech. What are you actually talking about? What is your case? And then argue your case. And please use all the things that we've already discussed. Use your pathos, use your logos, use your ethos, use rebuttals. Already come up with the other side to the story. Use examples. Illustrate your case as best as you possibly can. And then, of course, you want to finish off with a conclusion. Sometimes it's also called an epilogue. You want to use that conclusion, first of all, for jogging people's memory of what you've talked about. Remember the sequence of 3. People need to hear things 3 times. That's why you want to state your case in your introduction, state your case in the middle part of your speech, and restate your case in the epilogue. It's very important that your audience actually remembers what you've said. And ultimately, what you want to try and establish during your epilogue is that people feel goodwill toward you. People have positive emotions toward you. So leave them with something that they can carry close to their hearts. Leave them with an impression that is good. Leave them with the impression that you care about them. If you keep all of these things in mind, your political messages and your political candidates should be perfect.
Around you, from a distance you can tell